Hi there and welcome to another Unity 5 tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to continue on the character controller that I created in the previous one that shows you how to control a flying character. Now this tutorial I'm going to demonstrate how we can use the mouse to change the direction in which the character is flying. The direction it's flying towards. Now you can use this as a standalone, so you don't have to watch the previous one. This will work with other characters as well for getting them to face where the mouse is pointing. So the objective here is to get the game object, which is the if we go to the root of the character and have a look at their axis system, on this guy here, you can see he's got the forward axis, which is the Z axis, and we want to get this axis to align with where the mouse is pointing in the environment, and that will turn him around. Any other thing you want him to be doing, such as leaning forward or flying and that sort of thing, you need to control in the animation, which I do show you how to do in the previous tutorial. So let's just show you what I've got so far. I've taken the code from the previous tutorial and modified it just a little bit, and this is what it does. If I press play, is that he will just sit there. The arrow keys don't work anymore, but if you hold down the space bar, he'll go into his fly animation and he'll just fly forward, so we've got no way to control the direction that he's going in. So the code that I've got for that, which was based on the previous one, has been stripped down a fair bit. So this is a class called drive. So create a drive.cs file. If you want to put this code on some other character, you could even put it on a rectangle if that's all you've got as a character. Not a rectangle, a cube or a prism or something. And this will work. You just have to leave out the code for the animations. While I'm talking about animations, you should also note that I haven't changed anything in the animator for this character from the previous tutorial. So that's all still the same. You don't need to touch it. So this character has a speed and a rotation speed at the top. It's got the animation controller if you've got animations. Then in the update function, we create a float for rotation, which is going to be set to 0. And this will be the way that the character then turns each time. And without the mouse being involved, it's not going to turn. We've then got an if the space is being held down, which will translate the character forward. So it's along the Z axis by 0.3. Again, if you're doing this without animations, just leave out these anim lines here and it will still push your character forward when you press the space bar. Now the rest of the code is related to if there is a rotation. And if there is a rotation, then your character is going to rotate left or right, but its animation is going to look like it is. So we're not controlling the game object's rotation around the Z or around the Y axis at all in this code. It just changes the way the character appears as to whether he's banking to the left or banking to the right. Again, if you're doing this without animations, you could just leave out that entire slab of code from there to there. So all this code is doing is pushing the character forward by 0.3 in the Z direction when the space bar is being held down, and that's it. Okay, so the most important thing that we want to do now is to grab hold of where the mouse is in the environment and get the Z axis of your character, which is this here, to point where the mouse is on the landscape. Now the mouse lives pretty much in the screen coordinates, which are these ones sort of here, which is the front of the camera. We need to get the position of the mouse on this window here and project it into the environment to a point, and then direct our Z-axis at that point. So if I clicked over here, then we want the character Z-axis to rotate around and point to over there. Now the easy thing to do if you've got a landscape like I've got here or some kind of geometry is to use a raycast and a collider to get the point that you've ended up clicking on. So that can be achieved with a very simple if statement inside of this update loop. So after this, if space is being down and before the rotation animation stuff, we're going to insert some code in here. And it's checking if the left mouse button is being held down. If it is, it's then going to perform a raycast, which shoots a line from the position of the mouse, which is here, into the environment until it hits something. When it hits something, it fires this raycast here, this physics.raycast, and we get out of it a hit value, and that's where the line going from the mouse position on the screen into the environment, where it hits the thing that's in the environment. And in this code, I've got a debug.draw, so you can actually see that line being drawn. And then when that line hits something, we use that hit point on our character with a transform.lookAt. So the transform.lookAt looks at that point in the environment that was hit by the mouse being clicked on it. And then we're also going to use the position of the mouse on the screen to determine a rotation value for that character. So the position of the screen, if I just switch back up to here, this position on the screen, if we were to click the mouse up here and get its mouse position values, would be 0, 0. And that means that this position over here is the screen width by the screen height. Now, we're moving this mouse like this, so naturally, if we move the mouse on this side of halfway, we would expect the character to be turning in this direction. If we move the mouse on this side of halfway, we would expect the character to be moving on that side. So we need to work out a position of the mouse pointer relative to the center of the screen. So this line down the center here is the width of the screen divided by 2. And then if we take away that value from the position of the mouse, we can then tell whether the mouse is on this side of the screen or on this side of the screen, and use that value to turn our character either way, left or right. So I'll just go back into here. And that's what this code is doing down here. Just this line here works out how much rotation and in which direction of the screen. Okay, so if it turns out that this value here is calculated to be a negative value, then we're wanting the character to turn to the left. So the mouse must be on the left side of the screen. And alternatively, if you've got the mouse on the other side of the screen, it's going to be turning right. Okay, so if you're following along with the animations from the previous tutorial, you might notice that I've also added in this line here and this line here to ensure that the right turn animation is turned off when you're turning left and that the left animation is turned off when you're turning right. Okay, so that's pretty much the code, and if I save that, I'll come back into Unity and we'll try it out. So let's run it. Now remember, he's not going anywhere unless you hold down the spacebar. Now if we want him to fly down here, for example, we need to put the mouse down there, and I've got that mouse button down for your input so that I can just move this mouse around freely and it won't do anything unless I actually click. So now if I click down there, you can see that he went in that direction. And now I can click over here and back in that direction. And you can see that I'm controlling him based on where the mouse is hitting the environment. Now sometimes you might hit a very far away part of the environment that raycast isn't hitting, and therefore it has no effect, because a raycast usually only goes for a certain distance. And in this case, the other thing we've got is that the sky, the mouse clicking on the sky is not going to do anything for us because there's nothing to collide with. So we need to add a little bit of a trick within there to make that mouse collide anywhere that hits in our environment. Now, the simplest way to do that is to add some geometry in the environment that it's going to collide with. our mouse that is. So if I just zoom out here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a plane into the environment. And this plane is essentially going to represent the far plane of the camera, or at least kind of fake the far plane of the camera. So here's our plane. I'm going to attach it to the camera so that wherever the camera goes, it goes as well. Now, its rotation, we don't want it rotated around the Y or the Z. And you actually want it rotated to be -90 so that it's sitting flush to the camera. And if I can find my camera here in this view and turn around, you'll see that this plane is now sitting nice and flush with this camera. And we can move that plane, if I grab hold of it, in the Z direction to move it away or closer to, depending on what you want. Now, because you want the mouse to be able to move anywhere in this environment, you'll want this plane to take up the entire window. So if it's a bit further away, and you probably want it to be a decent distance, you're going to have to then select it and scale it up so that it's filling up that entire screen. Okay, now when we move our character around using the mouse and clicking, the mouse will collide with this and give us a point to turn towards. So it's going to give us a hit point. Of course, we don't want to see this ugly screen in here. We want to see our environment. So we can just turn off our mesh renderer for that plane. So it's still there. It's still going to create something for the mouse to hit. And because it's attached to the camera, it's going to go everywhere the camera does. So if I click in here, let me click the camera. If you have a look over in the scene view, can you see that debug ray line that I created in there? You can see where it's actually hitting that, and you can see that the little guy is moving around according to it. So if we start moving, which is the space bar, notice in the scene that that nice little colliding plane we made is now attached to our camera and going everywhere with us and determining how our character is going to fly. So that's it for this tutorial. Nice and simple. How to get your mouse to collide with a point in your world environment and to use that point to modify the behavior of a moving character. So we're basically getting the Z value of the character to rotate around so that it's pointing in the direction of where the mouse click is. Thanks for listening.